All right, and we are rolling. Hello, humans, and hello to all those non-humans and ascended master humans also watching. Gita Rose here. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Gabbing with Gita. And today I am joined with Humberto Braga. Humberto Braga is a holistic wellness coach, writer, artist, and entrepreneur who is focused on conscious evolution and bringing creative solutions to uplift humanity. His current project is GuideTrue.com, which custom matches people with a variety of practitioners and resources to streamline their personal development. And it's completely free for everyone to use. So hello, Humberto. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Gita. It's so good to see you again.
Likewise. Yeah, we have mutual friends and we have known each other for 8 or 9 years now.
In this incarnation, yes.
Yes. Yeah, beautiful. So this is a fun opportunity for us to gab and to catch up because we actually haven't had that in quite a while, and then be able to offer that for listeners to get a chance to know you as well. So yeah, it's so exciting just to chat and gab in this way, and that's what this is all about.
I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, so let's do it. So first off, I like to ask people, we had the little bit of a bio, but in your own words, who are you and what is it that you're about in your services during this time of deep transformation? Who is Humberto?
Oh man, the big question, who am I? Yeah, transdimensional carbon-based hologram. I'm really just a person who is trying to make the world a better place. I've never felt like I fit into the world. I've always, ever since I was a kid, just saw and felt on a deep intuitive level that something's wrong and that things need to change. That I'm not here to be, caught up in the status quo, that I'm here to effect some kind of deep transformative change. And so that's what my life has been dedicated to. Yeah. And the latest thing, like you said, is GuideTrue.com. And I'm really passionate about it. I'm really excited about it because I really feel like the way the world does wellness right now just does not cut it. We have a mental health epidemic. If it was cutting it, there wouldn't be an epidemic. So the way I see it, my platform allows a free platform for practitioners and people to get the help that they need, custom matched, all community rated, all for free.
That's so amazing. So let's dive into that just to give a little bit of an overview of what GuideTrue is, and then we'll go and let it flow and see what comes up. But just to explain just a little bit further of what GuideTrue is.
Yeah. So basically what a person, let's say we have a wellness practitioner, and we host all kinds of practitioners. So it can be therapists, physical fitness coaches, psychics, tarot readers, mediums, alternative health and energy, women's issues, everything, literally anything that can be considered something that helps a person live their best lives. You have a place there, and people want to connect with you. And what we do is we give people a personal assessment, and it's super quick, super easy. And then from that assessment, we connect them with the practitioners that best meet their needs of where they need to develop and grow. So instead of spending thousands of dollars and months or even years trying to find the right person to work with you, we streamline that for free. And we save you all that. Plus, if you are a practitioner, you can get access to a person's personal assessment, which means you get to see where they're at, you get to see their history of wellness, you can streamline your client intake, and you can make sure that that person is aligned with what it is that you're looking to attract before you enter into that contract.
Oh, it's so exciting. It's such a brilliant idea. Like, to me, it kind of, and I think maybe you've used this language before, to me, it kind of almost feels like a social media platform meets Yelp meets just like all of it that is encompassed into one site specifically for people that are wanting any modality of healing.
100%.
Yeah, it's so exciting, and there's nothing like it really that we have in our community right now. So thank you so much for creating it for all of us, and congratulations. I know it was an idea, and then it involved a lot of legwork and commitment to doing it, and so it's up and rolling now for just practitioners to sign up, or is the whole site Up and rolling right now.
The whole site is up and rolling right now. We're
Yeah.
having sort of like an alpha release just to kind of get a feel for it. We're getting a lot of feedback from practitioners on where we can improve things, like minor things, but it's up and running. So people can just jump in, and the sooner you jump in, the more exposure you're going to have, because we're going to be pushing a lot of marketing to get it out there in the months to come.
Nice. Oh, that is so exciting. And I know that there's people listening that are perhaps excited, as someone looking for services, but also I think there's a lot of people listening that are stepping out and beginning their own business or venture or passion project as being their own service provider. So
100%.
that's super exciting.
Yeah, and people shouldn't have to pay an arm and a leg to help the world and get their name out there and be connected to the clients that need them. So
yeah. Yes. So thank you so much. So that is GuideTrue.com.
Yep, GuideTrue.com.
Yeah, that's awesome. Again, thank you so much. And I'm excited myself to, start sharing on there more and start doing it. I really haven't played around on it too much. So I'm excited, to jump on there and create a web and a community, right? For just more of us to be able to come together and to be able to target what you were saying, there are issues, right? Sure, there's like the the idea of like, oh, we create our reality and there's levels of truth to this. There's levels of like, we have chosen to have these experiences. There's levels of truth to that as well, for sure. And then there's also perhaps we might say the true is that it's like things are messed up. Things are not okay. Things are, not as they could be. It's a very, we might say a sick society that we are here to bring change to. And just so like diving real deep into that in that way. So how is the last few months been? How has your 2020 been in terms of just bringing it all together and perhaps further stepping into your passion and your mission? So it's a question that I'm kind of starting off with most people is, how has your 2020 been?
Yeah, and that's a big question. And personally, I'm of the opinion that I see challenges as opportunities to grow. Yeah. And so while there's a lot of struggle and a lot of pain, I've been seeing so many people awaken at the same time, faster than ever, more people than ever before in history. And that gives me a lot of hope. That gives me a lot of happiness to see people finally, because we've been going through such a collective amnesia, not just of, like what it means to be free, but also what it means to be aligned with healthy divine forces and not put our faith in these authoritarian institutions, really recalibrating what it means to be human, to be healthy, and to be, socially proactive and in truth, And what we find is that, once you realize that the external world has been built on lies and corruption, you start to see how you fed into that, your beliefs into that, how you've been lying to yourself. And then it trickles down into yourself and you see the lies and your own pathological behavior, right? Because the outside mirrors the inside. And so as the external world dissolves, as these institutions crumble and they start to, dissolve and all these things come to the surface, it's like the shadow of the world is coming to the surface. In America, what is it? The Pluto returns. It's Pluto returns for America. So all the shadow stuff is coming out and I freaking love it. And all these people with this COVID, it's like they're stuck indoors and, people either react, they react in extremes, and that's the shadow coming out as well. So it's a really juicy, wonderful time of transformation that I love personally. And like I said, I think that if people just had the mindset that just keep in mind that things have to get worse before they can get better. Okay. So if you can look at a bad situation and say, oh, thank God it's getting worse, that means it's one step closer to getting better and finding resolution, then you're going to have a much easier time with this and navigate it much more graciously.
Yes, so well said. And you have a sparkle and a commitment and a fun and an authenticity to how you communicate these ideas that's just unmistakably true. No, it's so fun just to hear it, to feel it. That's been something that I've really been enjoying doing these interactions with people is there's a resonance that is undeniable in someone's voice. And I think that's why more and more of us are really excited to kind of listen to these long talk formats and stuff. And so there's like a ping in the way that you communicate, just being yourself. That's just so fun to hear. And I think that it's something that is, again, just undeniable. Um, and and it's the level of truth, right, that we can see in other individuals that then we're able to fully harness and utilize, and like it builds like a muscle. There's all these different ways of translating it, but I'm just um, opening the opportunity for people to just feel the resonance more and more and more within each other's voices. And there's something about it that's so palpable and powerful, and it leads me to asking you a question, because you speak with such flow, with such spark, with such pizzazz, at like this cadence in a way that's just really like, I might only get like every other word. And I'm finding too that this is something that a lot of our new paradigm divine masculines are just so efficient at, is like speaking in this way, where me as a feminine, I may only get like every other word, but I'm like, oh, I don't care, like I feel it. That's so great. So I'm just wondering, in your experiences as yourself coming into yourself, did you always speak in this way? Or was it something that you really had to like learn to be able to cultivate within you?
Um, I think it has to do with caffeine, actually, boys and girls. That's the secret ingredient right there. Um, no, it's something that I definitely
Yeah.
I had a theater background as
Cheers.
well. Yes, cheers.
Yeah.
I had a theater background, but I was never a person who wanted to be in the spotlight. Like I said, I was always very comfortable on the fringes of society, kind of looking in from the outside, like, what the hell are those crazy people doing over there?
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is, the more I committed to deepening my being in truth, the more effortless it became to speak from that
Mm-hmm.
truth, you know? And I feel all of us, when I love what you said about people having these conversations, right? Because we all stand on the backs of giants who came before us,
Mm-hmm.
and we derived inspiration from them. They gave us the courage to go deeper. They gave us the path and the map to go deeper. And so it's incumbent on us to go deeper as well.
Mm.
And when we go deeper in ourselves, I feel that there's a natural alignment that happens where you speak from that truth. Because when you have the privilege to go deeper, and you have that, you have the responsibility to speak out and to do
Mm.
something with it. And if you speak from that core of love and responsibility and knowledge, then there's no way you can misguide yourself or misspeak,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all coming from an authentic place. As long as you're not trying to do it, you're just feeling it, you're embodied with it, then you're fine.
Beautifully said. Yeah, thank you for that. And this is also something that I've been talking about more on the podcast, and more in my relationship with my friends, is really taking note of how much I've learned from being in the theater, and how much that upbringing has really wired my brain to be conditioned with the experience of like positive external response, and that how really it makes it in ways a lot easier to be able to recognize our individual truth, and to be able to then, as you're saying, like commit to that, and to feel the potential effect of our power, um, and it's something that again is just like a really interesting theme for me, because I'm asking everyone, kind of starting the conversation off in this way, is different ways that we can apply the experience of pushing through to just speak our truth, to make videos, or to be ourselves in the world, and to find that level of power and knowingness of our authenticity. But there's a gap, there's moments where it just involves like that push, right? um and so again, and this is something that I just kind of like keep digging at with people. I'm like, no, like let's find a little bit of a different translation. So for you, like, because I know recently too, you've started stepping out and sharing more videos, and not only creating GuideTrue for all of us, but also creating yourself to be a little bit more of a service provider, or someone that is now in the spotlight and isn't just over here. So in your experiences, is there anything that you can put language to that allowed you to like know that you had to make that shift, or know that you were ready to like push yourself
Yeah.
forward into that spotlight?
Yeah. I had been writing for years and years and years. So all these concepts that I've been working out in my head, I put into writing. People love my writing. I've been getting tremendous feedback. And then people kept on asking me questions on
Mm,
social media. And then I realized like I need to I need to do something with this. I can't
mm,
just keep spending my days helping people for free. I need to get some sort of reciprocity in here and really
mhm,
filter out people who are sincere more than just people who are looking for free handouts and don't really appreciate it, because you can
mhm,
waste your time with a lot of that. So that's why I started to recognize the
mm,
importance
mm.
of creating, a professional side project where it's like,
Yeah,
this is like, if you want to go deeper with me, we can do that in a sacred space, but there has to be an agreement. But
yeah,
long story short, writing helped
yeah.
to help get these ideas out. Also, you know what? When it comes to speaking publicly, for a lot of people, it's never going to be easy. Okay, it's not easy for anyone really. Even with my theater background, I still have to take a bunch of takes before it like
Mhm.
really feels right, and I'm like, that sucked, and I'll judge myself, and then I'll have like 20 versions that I didn't like, and I'll finally get the one that like really flows because I've been in my head this whole time, and that's
Mhm.
just part of it.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. There's so many kind of little subtleties and allegory and metaphor in there for people watching and listening, like regardless of what it is that we're wanting to push through. Because really, I feel like that's a big energetic realization that a lot of us are going through during these times, as we're seeing things that like we really do not prefer, that we need to do things, we need to take the action, we need to build. So there's such, and I think a lot of people have been in this space of writing or having a certain level of conscious reflection, right? And then as we experience our timeline, our story, such as you having all of these people coming to you to ask you different questions, then we begin to a lot of the time see symbolism or synchronicity that starts to show itself to us, like in
Yeah,
our story, right? And we're like, oh, there's a pattern here that is an indication perhaps of my specific place
yeah,
and
it's
what
the
I can
call.
really provide. Yeah,
Yeah. It's the call to
absolutely.
action on the hero's journey.
Yes. Yeah. And there can be, the refusal of the call for a while. And I a lot of times too, I think about one of my favorite scenes in movies is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where
Yeah.
Cameron's lying in bed and Ferris keeps calling him and calling him, and he's like, dude, you're not sick, like get out of bed. Right. And then he's in the car and he's like, he's just going to keep calling. He's going to
Calling.
keep, I'll go, I'll go, I'll go, I'll go. I always think about that moment as kind of like a more modern, yeah, right? It's super good.
I love it.
Um, and we all just have to find that, let that Cameron go. Like we all just
Yeah.
have to like find that place in ourselves. Um, and knowing our worth to what you said, is such an important idea, because I feel like so many of us are givers. Like we know that we're here
Yeah.
to help change things, and we can, I think, sometimes fall into confusion of like, oh, this information is free, oh, I'm here to help, oh, we're endlessly abundant, oh, I'm an endless resource. And it's I'm really happy to see that it's more and more it's becoming an understanding that's like, play with money. It's okay. It's necessary. It's needed. It's the reflection, right, of that worth and the innate abundance that is all of us.
And also, people don't appreciate things unless they pay for it. And it doesn't have to be money. Like, there's an energetic exchange in a lot of ways, you know, but definitely that reciprocity is key.
Yes. It absolutely is. And then it just all builds from there, and it's then the mirrors being able to align in different ways. And yeah, and it's really interesting. I guess just for every individual, it's going to be completely different what that spark is that gets you to sit in the car and go like, okay, I'm going. I'm going to go. And for everyone it's different, but I'm just so curious as to help, you know, I am just fascinated by it. Honestly, it's like, what is it? And how can we talk about it or look at it in these different ways, just to shine the light on that, almost like trauma that a lot of us have in regards to not being able to move into action, to commit to our passions, our true excitements, right?
Oh, now you're opening up the big box of trauma. And if you want to go there, that's a big one
Yay!
for sure. Let me say one thing though, is that what I've realized is that nobody gives a shit if you mess up. Like, nobody cares because everyone is so busy worrying about themselves that if you have one thing, like, look, you have to accept the fact that your first painting is going to suck, your first article is going to suck, your first video is going to suck, but you keep doing it. And no matter what happens, when you keep doing it, it gets better and better. And that's the process. Nobody cares that your first one sucks. You know what? And if it doesn't, you know, launch you into super stardom or whatever, then who cares? You know, you're going to feel amazing about yourself. And B, like, most people never even take a swing at bat. Okay. And then when they die, they're like, oh, I wish I would have done that. They have regret. Don't die with regret. Like, make it happen. And don't let your own inner critic hold you back. Like you talk about from trauma, that's the super ego, the parent that never validated your emotions, who never supported you the way you needed from your inside. Like, you're not good enough. And if you're not good enough, you shouldn't do this and blah, blah, blah. That's nonsense. That's all in your head. You have to get over that.
Yeah.
And that's
I
what I
love
help
that.
people do, because you're right. It's an inner blockage.
So let's put the trauma box over there, because you just said something. We'll get into that, because that's a big passion, and really I feel like a level of expertise that you have. So we'll jump into that in a moment, because I also wanted to reflect the idea of what you just said, and also what you were saying when you were sharing before about taking multiple takes of something. And again, I always like to be able to see things in a metaphorical, kind of like allegorical sense. So again, going back to the idea of like the first thing that we do, the first time that we really commit to whatever it is, to writing, to the painting, like, it's not going to live up to our expectations, right? And there's, I think, sometimes a level that we fall into, or even when we've made like mistakes, even when we have like not been our full, true, altruistic spiritual self, and we react in ways, or we slip into our traumas, into those places. I think sometimes a lot of us can be really, really hard on ourselves when we've made any type of quote unquote mistake. And of course there is that, taking responsibility and learning from it, but not to the point where it pulls us into these deep negative cycles. And I've played with the idea before in my own journey and in my own experience, whether it's shooting a YouTube video or talking with my mom, that a mistake is just an opportunity to take another take, to just do it again, right? You're like, okay, well, that didn't go very well. Great. Let's cut, reset, and like, let's go at again in another scene. So I just wanted to reflect that, because the language that you used, I think, is really fun. And it led me to those imaginative places where we can, again, use these ideas in many different ways that help us be the best versions of ourselves in each little scene of the play that we're in.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So the trauma box, right? This is a big, really, I think what, and it's, I have my own bit of experience, like I do in terms of trauma, but this is something that more and more I'm really owning within myself, that at least in terms of like personal trauma, perhaps what I signed up for or what I put on my plate at like the blueprint buffet, comparatively speaking, I really didn't put that much on my plate in terms of experiences of trauma. Sure, I've got, some, but more and more I'm owning my place perhaps in experience where I'm like, oh, whoa, like I really don't understand that perhaps to the same level as other people, in terms of the real effects of that in an interpersonal way. So diving as deep as you want to, taking any angle that you want to with this idea, how has trauma in your experience, whether it's personally or within society, how has it affected you, or perhaps how have you alchemized it to even find the opportunity of lessons in it?
Well, the first memory I have is traumatic. Like
Mm.
when I was really young, that's when the systems came on. Like, oh
Mm.
shit, I got to wake up and survive. And I remember seeing my parents fighting, arguing and whatnot. And I think that people need to understand also before we dive in what trauma is.
Thank you.
And trauma is a breaking of boundaries
Mm.
and feeling that loss of safety, and especially when you're a baby, a child,
Mm.
and this even goes in utero. When the
Mhm.
mother's heart rate increases, the baby's heart rate increases in utero. When the stress chemicals go up, stress chemicals activate in the child, and that affects their neurology.
Mhm.
We can say that in the world, all of us experience trauma on
Mhm.
some level, because when it's not just like physical boundaries, but also emotional boundaries. And when people think physical boundaries, they think, being hit or sexually abused. But if you look at children when they're growing up, they're very embodied. They're
Mm.
very much playful and expressing themselves. And parents shut them down, like,
Yeah.
don't move like that. Don't touch yourself. Don't pull up your shirt in public. And they're shamed for expressing their bodies. And they aren't, how to put this, parents do not emotionally attune with their children. They
Mm.
don't get on their level, connect with them in a way that they can understand, and offer them the safety and support that they need and the guidance they need to understand what's right and what's wrong, you know?
Mhm.
So that is very traumatic to the child mind, because when
Mm.
parents don't do that, when you're a baby, you never think my parent is an asshole. This person is evil. A child internalizes it like, oh, this is my God. And if
Mm.
my God is mad at me and says I'm wrong, then there's something wrong with me. And
Mhm.
they internalize that and they compound it. And that's during the formative years that create the mind, the superego that's going to forever
Mhm.
be in the back until you learn to heal it and repattern it. I had that in my mind. I'd say that trauma has been one of my greatest motivators,
Mm.
to be honest with you.
Mm.
And it's been the voice that says this is not good enough. Like, it
Mm.
needs to be better. Things can be better.
Mm.
And there's so much out in the world to validate that voice, because you can see the world through a lens of constant panic and fear and
Mm.
inadequacy, right? But as I healed, I recognized that, it's a process. Healing
Mm.
trauma is a process, awakening is a process. And instead of feeling that, not good enoughness all the time, I recognize that, it's good enough for now, as long as it's striving
Mm.
to get better.
Mm.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah, that's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like, when people
continue.
judge,
Mm.
like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like, yes, you are for now. You are doing great. Like, if you talk to yourself 5 years ago and look to where you are now, you 5 years ago would be so overjoyed to see the progress you made.
Yeah.
You're amazing. Okay. Don't judge yourself in the micro. Look at the macro. Look at the big picture. You're doing amazing
Yeah.
with what you have, what you knew, and where you're at. Like,
Yeah.
have compassion for yourself.
I love that. It's so beautiful. And just to clarify for people, because it isn't as though I haven't experienced, what it is that you're talking about in terms of parents not really being fully reflective in the cycles of family abuse and trauma, like I have experienced, but
Mhm.
and in my connection with whether it's God or source or extra dimensional energies or guides or whatever we want to label. And I'm sure, actually, I know it's a huge orchestra, it's a huge cacophony, it's kind of like an orgy around me all the time of these different beings that when I was really, really young, I mean, like 3 years old, would step in and kind of remind me of the structure of things and to be like, no, this isn't you. This is, you're in an experience. It's very much part of the play. Like, don't take it personally. And like, you're doing great. And then it became later in my 20s of finding that voice and that perspective for myself, of being able to stay super compassionate and to be able to be that God perspective, that guide perspective for myself, So I think what you said is so important and so crucial and so helpful if we can remind ourselves as we're climbing up the endless peak, right? Because like the mountain never stops. We're always just climbing up. And if we can remind ourselves in those moments where we are just going and going, to take a moment and turn around and go, whoa, look how far you've climbed. Like, look at the view. You're doing perfect for what you are right now. You have totally done, you're doing your best for right now. Yeah, I think that's so beautiful and so important, and just brings us into that space too of the ability to observe all things, um, and yeah, it's such a personal topic for each individual in terms of what they have or haven't experienced. And again, it's just, I think, just being able to talk about it in different ways, and even to own, to even say, we've all been traumatized. We're all traumatized.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's a level of power, is just having the courage to even say it in that way. I think is really powerful. And yeah, and that's a big part of, I think, what is happening in our society right now, right? Is that level of consciousness, right? Of like stepping out of the denial.
Yeah. Finding our way to heal, because we all have our own entry point. Not everyone is meant to go to a Tony Robbins seminar and unleash the power within and heal. Like, that's not everyone's path.
Yeah.
People need something more gentle. Some people need more spiritual. Some people need more, traditional therapy. Whatever your path is, everyone has their own entry point. And we can't really judge people and like put them down for it. It's just about understanding where people are at.
And so I'm curious, because I don't even actually know this. What was your entry point? So you knew that perhaps you had incarnated into a society that had deep issues, that you knew that you were connected to the embodiment of transformation and change. But what was your entry point? How did things begin to start to like open up and connect for you? If you want to share a bit about that,
In
because
terms
I
of
don't even know.
healing or awareness or
Yeah, or all of it, or what was it first? Was it the healing that perhaps led to the awarenesses of alternative truth in history? Was it alternative truth in history that led to the understanding of
yeah.
healness? Was it these extra dimensional, like it just and if however you want to share that bit, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, sure. So here's the spark notes. When I was a kid, I would always see spirits in my room. I would see UFOs in the sky. And I would ask, my mom made me go to church when I was young. So I would always ask the pastor, I'm like, why aren't UFOs mentioned in the Bible? Like, what about dinosaurs? Like, and I would start questioning these things, like, why doesn't the framework of society match the reality that I'm experiencing? And why is nobody talking about these things? And when I talk about these things, people seem to dismiss it, but it's the most interesting part. So I started digging deeper intellectually. My path was the intellectual path. And I went down that with ridiculous rigor until I hit, I got to spirituality, and like, spirituality isn't enough. I need to go to esotericism and alchemy. So I was reading Fulcanelli and getting deeper into Gnosticism and Hermeticism and, Gurdjieff and Sri Aurobindo,
Mm.
and these very, very deep teachings.
Can I ask how old were you when you were reading those teachings?
This was in my mid 20s.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and really what helped me awaken is the fact that, have you ever seen Half Baked when Kenny's in prison and he's like, so you guys believe in angels and stuff like that? And everyone, like, nobody can connect with him. That was me for the first like 20 something
Mm.
years of my life. And finally, when I moved out to LA from Wisconsin,
Mm.
I just brought it up among some new friends that I met at work. And then someone's like, oh yeah, David Icke and blah, 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 blah. And he started talking. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can talk about this.
I'm not alone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is amazing. So that's when the synergy happened.
Mm.
That's when I started to put things together and get a newfound passion for going deeper.
Mm.
And so I went deeper into the esoteric realm, and then getting into the corruption part of, seeking truth about society. I started questioning, like, what is the psychological profile of a person who would do this to millions of people? Like, who would drop an atomic bomb on innocent people, 2 atomic bombs on innocent people? And, it's like, no, narcissism isn't enough.
Mm.
A megalomaniac is not enough. Okay. Egomania, that doesn't cut it. Okay. So what I found through my studying of psychology is that these people are literal psychopaths, not sociopaths, because sociopaths are the kind that are, in society peeing themselves and yelling at people on the street corners and, but psychopaths. And they're people who blend in amazingly, and they mimic emotion. They, say all the right things and they act the right way, but their motives are ulterior. They're very subversive, and they are masters of manipulation. And so by studying more about psychopathy, I got deeper into the psychological literature. And when I did that, that's when I started reading. I read a book called The Narcissistic Family. And that was like, every page I read, like, if your parents' needs were more important than yours when you were growing up, you may be narcissistically wounded. And everything I read was like, oh geez, oh man, that's me, that's why I'm messed up. And it wound up just awakening a lot in me. There was, before then, I had done a lot of psychedelic journeys as well. And I think psychedelics helped to remove a lot of the debris that was obscuring my vision. When I had done mushrooms for the first time, I remember thinking, like, wow, everything is psychological. Like, this is before I got into reading anything. I remember thinking, like, wow, everything, like, the reason why people do what they do, interact the way they interact, the way they hold their bodies, the way they breathe, and the way that, or the way they don't breathe and they hold their breath. It's all up here. And that's when I realized, wow, I have to go deeper within. There's no external answers. So I have to, like, figure this out. So psychedelics played a big role as well. But yeah, I think it was just, the intellectual path, esotericism, psychopathy and psychology, and then finding my own awakening and going deeper with that to understand the root of my trauma, and seeing, when I found compassion and understanding in myself, that's when I found more compassion and understanding for the world around me. Because before then I was just mad that people are asleep, they're robots, and they have no interest in awakening. And, and that's fine. I've come to terms with the fact that the world is not meant to collectively awaken, right? It's like, human beings are like blood cells in your body. Okay. Now you can lose a few blood cells and the body would be fine. It's like the world can have people ascend and transcend, but not everyone can, because the world serves a function in the cosmic choreography. And so that function is to create life, to breed, and then we can get into the hyperdimensional matrix control system and how extraterrestrials play into that, because that's a whole another part of the biosphere. But you find peace and understanding when it comes to the inadequacies, supposed inadequacies of life, when you go deeper in the self-work. And that's how I got there.
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that and just that little bit of the overview of your hero's journey. And it's really, there's something about it that was actually just like really quite sweet when I was feeling into just imagining all of us in our own ways. And I suppose it's actually very simple, but I've never really thought of it in this way, in this kind of like literal kind of storytelling format way, where so many of us, at least people listening that have been on this journey, we really are kind of in this hero's journey story of incarnating into an experience that just doesn't feel right.
Mhm.
Like that level of amnesia, we're in this story, we're in this world building where we're like, this is off. Like, and then we all start going through our own experiences, our own unraveling points of like putting the mystery together, or just learning as much as we can to uncover and discover the true world, quote unquote, that we're actually existing in. And yeah, I guess it's just really sweet. Like I've never, it seems very obvious, of course, but I've never really like thought about it in that way. And just through you sharing your experience, it was almost like I was able to like tune into like the inner child that's just like in this unraveling and then really stepping into adulthood in this way. And I can't help a lot of times but just see things kind of from story or play or allegory. And it's really, again, very obvious in this way, but it's such an amazing journey that we are all on in terms of being on this discovery and putting the pieces together and kind of like matching up pictures, being like, oh, well, in my journey, I see this. Oh, and in your journey, you've seen this. And right now, it's so fascinating to watch how even people within the spiritual community, if on their journey they've picked up this piece of the puzzle or this side of the painting, and someone over here has picked up this piece, they're like, well, my piece is true and your piece, and we can't, interact. So yeah, let's dive into that a little bit, because I think it's really fun, and I think you and me may hold some different belief structures, but that really only comes from our different sides of exploration of the story, right? Like we've traveled different realms potentially, or have aligned with different pieces of information that fit into the puzzle, right? So we talked about this before we recorded. So let's dive into a couple of topics, and let's go and be as compassionate and just like, understanding, and again, kind of like holding a space for what it is we can all do in terms of listening to each other and going, oh, interesting, I never thought of that. So I'll be really honest, when you talk about the ET control matrix things, my kind of like it's almost like the little kid in me goes like, oh, my ETs aren't bad, like don't like attack, like my friends aren't trying to control us. But there are maybe levels of it that are. So I'm just kind of like opening up a different theme, a different idea, and then just kind of maintaining that character of traveling through the story. And I think you and I in this conversation, we can hold that space in a way where it's just going to be like just expansive. And then maybe for people moving forward, that's an idea that we can utilize when we're talking about all these different things, as we're just, the hero in our story. And this is what I've seen in my trials and tribulations. And so here's the at-one-ment, here's the the atonement. So yeah, let's go into that. What is your experience and understanding of what it is that you are referring to as the extra dimensional control matrix, if I'm getting that right? So yeah, I'll pass you the mic on that, because I'm curious.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing your feelings on that. I definitely get that from a lot of people. It's a sensitive subject. And first of all, I want to say that the universe is here to help us to awaken, okay? And that all these experiences, you can either, think of yourself as a victim of them, or you can learn from them, okay? Yeah. Now, there's also a saying that says, when the student is ready, the master will appear, okay? Nobody can really, how do I put this? When you're dealing with spiritual forces, thinking that, everything has to be pure good or pure evil is a very polarizing way of looking at things. And we need to use discernment, yes, but we also can't throw the baby out with the bathwater at the same time, because in our own physical life, like look at us, we kill in order to eat and survive constantly, whether through our own behaviors or through supporting industrial civilization that destroys entire ecosystems. Like,
Whether it's plants or animals, just saying.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So, that's what it is. It's not a good or bad thing, which I think people like to polarize in order to make themselves feel better one way or another. That being said, in terms of the hyperdimensional matrix control system, people have to understand that humanity is not the top of the food chain. There are beings above humanity in the spiritual realm, and some are good, some are not so good. And people like to think, well, if they're technologically advanced, like they have, interdimensional spaceships and they control, or they can show up in my dreams or abduct us. Like, if they're that technologically advanced, obviously they have to be good. Well, ask yourself, would the Native Americans have thought that of the Europeans? Like, oh, these guys are so technologically advanced, they must be good. Obviously, that's not true. So what we find, and if you look into the extraterrestrial phenomenon, and I made a documentary about this with my good friend Berthard, it's called UFOs, Aliens, and the Question of Contact. It's on YouTube, it's for free. I've also written articles on this as well. And it talks about how extraterrestrials that abduct people, like good extraterrestrials, like benevolent extraterrestrials, don't manipulate people and want to play chess. They're not going to take you against your will. They're not going to manipulate you. Okay. The way good forces interact with us to help guide us is through maybe like suggestions in a dream, but only when the seeker is sincere and they're ready. So there has to be like dedicated action behind it. You know what I mean? They're not going to force you to awaken. They're going to respect your process. They're going to force you to be abducted, right? They're not going to. So, and people also have these really good dreams that are abducted. And what they find when they do hypnotic regression therapy is that these are actually screen memories, and that other things happened because these extraterrestrial forces can control your consciousness and can control what you remember. So there's many layers to this of how we can discern what is true and what is not true, which also comes down to, refining your own inner instrument of discernment.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love that. Thank you so much. And in my experiences, I have interacted with a wide variety of extra dimensional representatives, from the good, the bad, the gray, and everything in between. And in my experiences, it is fully understanding the level of infraction upon the will, the understanding of negative intentions, and that paradoxically allows us to have that level of discernment, allows us to be able to feel the power of it, to be able to say no. So I actually had experiences where there was a gray that came into my room, and that at first I had this kind of like fear response, and I didn't know exactly what it was, but there was this level of comedy that was like really kind of sweet, and allowed me fully to understand, to make the choice, to be in the discernment, to accept the message in this way. And I was told, and I even had an experience of being paralyzed, but still I was very conscious that I was like, oh no, I am making the choice to interface with this. And it was revealed to me, this is the opportunity for you to know when it is relevant to choose to accept this. And then a couple of nights later, about a week or so later, I had an experience with extremely scary, like Dementor type energies that were extra dimensional or connected to different programs. And it was actually through the understanding of kind of what you're saying in terms of there being a food chain, right? Like how would I phrase this? I suppose my eternal optimist, or the parts that like, oh, I'm a fractal of God and I'm completely powerful, didn't want to accept that in this moment, right? I'm talking in this interaction. But in that moment, once I realized the truth of what was going on, that this consciousness was here to feed on my energy, it was only then when I realized it that I was able to have like the true, it really did feel like Harry Potter. That's why I call them like Dementors. It really felt like that. And it was only through the realization of that level of separation that I was able to like dig deep and find the love and find my power and kind of have this like the Patronus moment where I fought through the paralyzation and was able to get these beings out of me, out of my space. And I woke up and moved densities, and there was all this light and all this magic. But it was only through the understanding of what it is that you are talking about that actually allowed me to feel the power of it. So it is a sensitive topic for people. And I think for a lot of us that do resonate with very loving, benevolent interactions that we've had, that some of us sometimes get kind of like triggered. That's why I started in this way, where I was like, I'm just going to be really honest. I'm talking, I'm speaking for all of us little hybrids that have had all of our ET encounters. But in my experience, again, it is through owning the reality of the situation, kind of like what we were talking about earlier about like, yeah, we're creating things, but also there's a level of things that is like, not okay. And so to offer you again a line of, I like to just kind of like cast these general nets, right? To just invite where people want to plug in, because I think things that we are creating, or things that the universe, that God, that the one is creating in terms of these different beings and the whole greater story that we're telling, offers us opportunity to find in the moment, like you were saying, going back to the inward self, to the inner reflection all the time. So I think our society has a fear-based relationship with fear. I feel as though a lot of times we stay in kind of a middle place of feeling, not wanting to fully see the separation, the true kind of dark and light experience of things, or that things can be all things. And so in your experiences, either with interactions with these different fractions of ETs, or the understanding of this, and then also in the day-to-day life, in your experience, how does like really feeling the true reality that then gives understanding to the true emotion, how does that fit into your day-to-day experience? I'm kind of rambling, but I think you feel what I'm casting.
I got you. So I'm gonna riff on that.
Yeah.
How it's translated is, there's that Hermetic Principle from Hermeticism. I don't know if you've studied it or not, but it says, as above, so below,
Yeah.
right? We've all heard that. And so what I find is that a lot of the truths that apply on our reality also apply to hyperdimensional realities. So for example, the best lies are communicated sandwiched in between two truths, right? And that's why when it comes to navigating these hyperdimensional realities, it's very important to take things with a grain of salt and to not immerse yourself completely in it, but like have some discernment. And look, any being that is benevolent is going to want you to have that discernment. Like they want you to have that mental fortitude and that clarity to really build that muscle of discernment, right? It's an important thing. Not to be dismissive of everything, but just to see what's true and what's not true, and have your bullshit detector on point, so to speak. The other thing I've noticed, again, as above, so below, if you look, now people have a tendency to think, like with extraterrestrials, that, because, they care for us sometimes, or they feel cared for, that they are here for our benefit completely. But again, this comes down to like years of extraterrestrial research from Carla Turner, from Barbara Lamb, the David Jacobs. Like there are amazing researchers out there. And again, this is a very dense field. Unless you get into the research, it's easy to make generalizations. This is, so when I see, for example, in politics, people are like, oh, but the politicians care for us. They're saying all these good things and they're doing all these good things. but underneath it all, it's not really for our benefit, even though on the surface it does. Same thing with a farmer who tends to his flock. The farmer will feed the chickens, it'll take care of the sheep, but ultimately it's to shear them and harvest them when the time is ready.
Mm.
And that's what you find a lot in the extraterrestrial literature as well, of people who are abducted and they said that they feel great about it, but ultimately down the line, their eggs are harvested or sperm is taken, they have hybridized children. It's a very traumatic experience. Those things have
Well,
crossovers.
yeah. Yeah, and I know for myself, there are those that are perhaps listening and perhaps that have had both experiences, that it is traumatic, and then that also it does lead to, and again, the level that I'm connected to and the experiences that I've had are really specific. It's a very specific lineage and race of beings. And so, like you were saying, it is a challenge to not generalize with it. But I know a lot of people that have had donations, that have given donations in these different detainments or in these different experiences of the program, where it definitely leads to expansion and love and further knowing of their imagination. And I think it's a level of, and I think where we both kind of like vibe and find that resonance of this is it's the acceptance of the unknown, right? It's like the acceptance of there being this like mystery that is coming from in us and outside of us, as above so below. And it's the, yeah, like the embarking upon the mystery, whatever it may bring, still being in that place of discernment. But yeah, I just wanted to interject a bit, because I know for my personal experiences and for a lot of people watching, that it's those experiences in particular about having certain aspects of them harvested have actually been of a huge benefit in their reality. And maybe one could argue that that's coming from different belief systems or different levels of perpetuating trauma or belief systems or whatever, and that could be a level of it. um
There's many ways to look at it for sure.
yeah.
And we're talking, like I said before, like the universe, all of it is just lessons, right?
Mm-hmm.
When people are abducted, and I'm going to be doing a video on this, it's often because they have a part of their their energy that has allowed that, whether there's holes in their aura or there's some kind of trap of agreement that they made, and we can get into what traps of agreements are. That's a whole nother subject, but
Mm.
there is some weakness or allowance for that to happen. And so when these things happen, again, there are good things that can come of it, a lot of realizations, a lot of personal growth. Um, and there's also, opportunities to just become more aware in general,
Mm.
and awaken instead of just focusing on what's on Netflix tonight and getting your next
Mm-hmm.
meal. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so awakening doesn't always happen like we want. It doesn't
Mm.
always happen with the, ascended masters that we think it should be with. And sometimes it's traumatic. Like I had my own extraterrestrial abduction experience where I had claw marks on my body and
Mm.
puncture marks and skin taken off my body. And it was a very
Mm.
traumatic experience, but
Mm-hmm.
it awakened me to the reality that this is not just hypothetical. It's in
Mm-hmm.
fact real, it's
Mm-hmm.
visceral, but it's underlying everything.
Mm.
And it really is the topic of all topics.
Mm.
And because it is, you can't just, it's through everything, and everything is neither black nor white.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, because that's why I was prefaced in this way of kind of like honoring. I think we have very different experiences and almost having polarized experiences of interactions with these entities, but I think you really found the middle way. Like I always like to be able to be like, okay, there's this and this, and then where's the point in the middle, right? And I think the point in the middle is definitely the lessons, that it always goes back to all of these experiences being a lesson. And then you also brought up something that I do feel is really important in terms of there being, we could call it blocks or holes in someone's energy that allows them to be a match to it. Because I think that is a really important key thing that we've kind of like found, again, maybe how we can actually apply these things in our day-to-day life and how it makes us just be the true guide for ourselves in whatever way that manifests, right? Because it is, things can, we can have the experience, at least in my understanding, I'll phrase it this way, in my understanding of how these interactions or abductions or detainments, or even when an individual in a human individual is energetically feeding off of us, there needs to be some level of energetic match within ourselves, right, to be able to attract that. And then so that's where the invitation, where all parties, regardless of what you say, can really agree on that part of it, because then that leads us to the internal discovery of whether it's belief systems or traumas or agreements, as you're saying, in that way. So I'm curious what your thoughts are and feelings are on that level of things.
Yeah, and first of all, I just want to say, there's, again, nothing, I don't want to like generalize that, because there are people who have, like if you look at children who get stuck in a war zone, or like kids who get caught up in child sex trafficking, there was no trap of agreement there. Like they were powerless. So when people are, taken on, when they have really difficult experiences with those hostile spiritual forces, it's not your fault, right? It's not always your fault. It's not just because you're wrong or you're bad. There's lessons to be learned. And whether it's, your lesson that needs to be learned, or, you are helping to facilitate the lesson for someone around you, right? Like if a child is lost and their parent has to learn a lesson around that, like you are part of that co-creation of the experience, and that's part of the divine working itself through you. So I just wanted to say that before we jump into anything else, because that's a big one for people who have
it is, yeah. And it's, and again, that's where things are completely contradictory and contrasting, depending on what level of the building you're looking at, or what dimension maybe you're looking at. Because absolutely, in one level of the building or one dimension, that child is completely powerless, and they are not an energetic match to that situation in any way, shape, or form. And then looking at it from another level of the building, it's them completely playing this role fully of their power to be able to provide those lessons. So it's always that level of both. And that's an important distinction to make. And then again, I think perhaps the true empowering place that we need to be courageous enough to step into is going into kind of what we're saying again, of honoring the certain level of consensus truth, where it's like, sure, whatever metaphysical definition, the child made her choices. And it's like, yeah, but also it's not okay what happened. And that individual, that child, was powerless in that experience. And then, for those of us that are expanding our awareness to, sometimes the more powering choice is honoring the more dense reality. So I think that's really important to draw that distinction for those of us moving forward through these times. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah.
So I forgot what the question was originally, because I'm still in the moment with you.
Yeah, it's great. No, it's beautiful. So basically going into the idea of how, for those of us that are maybe in different experiences where it is a little bit more of a center of the building perspective, right? Where we can be in the understanding of, oh, there was a level of my choice, or of my lack of choice, or my laziness that made me a match to this, or a level of my trauma, or a level of, for those of us that are kind of in that middle gray point of being able to assess our energetic agreements or energetic bodies, to be able to not be a match to whether it's nefarious extraterrestrials or a toxic individual in our family, right? And how that can kind of be the center point for those of us that have contrasting ideas about anything, about how we can always take it back to the self, especially for those of us, again, that are in that middle point, and how that is the invitation for looking at belief systems or traumas or whatever it may be.
100%. Yeah. So underneath it all, if I could pass along one message to people, it's heal your trauma. Heal your trauma. If you do that on an emotional level, psychological level, like 98% of your problems will be solved. And And I cannot stress that enough, how powerful the
Mm.
unconscious is and the repercussions of avoiding all the things that we suppress. Once you start to heal that, then the maladaptive behaviors will cease in your life. The
Mm.
unconscious responses, whether it's your anger issues, your codependent relationships, your disassociation or your avoidance of personal responsibility, your playing it small, your depression, your disassociation, constantly being on the phone for way too long. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and just in general, like the authoritarian worship, the lack of
Mm.
embodiment, not being in your body. So your body gets diseased because you're so in your
Mm-hmm.
head all the time that you aren't feeling, and really not just feeling your body, but feeling the world through your body and understanding and allowing its vital intelligences to really come through and connect with your consciousness and inform your
Mm.
wholeness.
Mm.
Because when you're not living in your wholeness, what happens is, think of it like a tree, okay? When there's a hole in a tree, what happens? Bugs and animals get in there and they
Mm.
nest and they burrow into the tree
Mm.
and it causes disease. It's the same thing with your energy field. If you are not embodied in your wholeness, nature abhors a vacuum and something will come in into that space and like, oh, this is cozy. There's a
Mm.
match here. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the more you can heal your trauma, the more you're going to heal physically, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually.
Yeah, well said, powerful. And again, you have just such a sparkle when talking about the realness and the level of density and challenge that's required. And kind of like you just have this effervescence with the kind of the darker part of true experience. And I just love it. I love it so much. It's just such a fun kind of like punk rock
Got to go there.
polarity that you bring, right? You got to go there. That's what it's all about. And I feel just the passion that is resonant in your voice that gives the reminder for all of us to keep doing the excavation, to keep, looking for those holes and just and making it the true journey of really in every moment finding those pieces of trauma and finding those ways that we can bring more effervescence to the contrast. Is just really thrilling and exciting. So yeah, again, just thank you for being you and for bringing that flavor again of realism to looking at the places that um, are a bit darker.
Yeah. And I
Um,
just want to say, for people who are listening and really
yeah.
resonating, like, oh shit, I have to look at my stuff now, but I'm really scared to because there's
Mm.
so much back there. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel scary. But as someone who has gone through that and been on this process for years, I love helping people to realize how easy it can be to
Mm.
heal and to make this conscious and how fun it can be. Like, that's the thing. It doesn't have to be like, you shouldn't have to traumatize yourself again to get over your trauma. Like, that's ridiculous, but
Yeah.
it seems so scary because that fear of change, of letting go of that identification with being a victim or playing it small is so
Yeah.
overwhelming for a lot of people
Yeah.
that you know, it's actually easier than you think and it's more
It
fun than
is.
you think.
And what's interesting? What would we say to individuals that are like, yeah, I know, I've been doing this. I've been looking at my trauma. I've been looking at my trauma. I've been processing. I've been doing all of this, and I'm down, and it's then all of the things in the external world, and they know that they've been in the process for a while. What would you say to that person?
It's a process. It takes a while. Like, you've been conditioned for years, decades
Mm.
even, to feel awful about yourself, right? All
Mm.
that negative conditioning. Look, if you want to get back to neutral, to healthy, you need to have years of positive conditioning, okay?
Mm.
That's what it takes. You got to recalibrate yourself, okay? It's all part of the process. And if you feel like you're stuck in trauma land, then you know what? You're not making it fun enough. Okay. What you're super egoing yourself, like, I need to heal and get better. And like, what
Mm.
you're doing is you're constantly in the garden pulling the weeds, but you're not watering the flowers. Right?
Mm.
You gotta dance, you
Mm.
gotta sing, you gotta
Mm.
get in your body, like work out, let the rage out, have fun. And
Yes.
like, that's what it's all about. It's about reparenting yourself, repatterning yourself, and ultimately like you will get out of that darkness.
Yes.
Okay. Because you're not meant to live there. And if you're
Mm,
stuck there after years, then I would consider getting a different perspective, because
mm.
that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Mm, mm, I love that. I love that. Again, I just want to point out, like, there's just like I love hearing people's voices. It's just so much fun. And there's like this cheerleader, there's like this energy within you that you bring, like, you can do it, just do it, you can do it. Like, I just love hearing it. And that, what you just said is so important, is that you're not watering the flowers, you're not having fun, you're not finding ways where we can totally find ways to remember that, at least this is how I translate it. Again, I think this comes from the actor part of me that always remembers to some degree that I'm in a play, that I'm in an experience. And so when I'm crying and processing, when I'm really sad, there is that part of me that's still like always kind of like observing, like, oh, look how good she is in this scene. Like, yeah, she's just like going for it. And that's the level of fun in a play. And I think also then creating ways, like you just said, working out, dancing, finding different physical expressions and physical movements to move these energies in really healthy and energizing, expressive ways. So I know that you are, I mean, you're an artist of many trades. So you are a visual artist. I believe that you play guitar, right? Like, you're really expressive. So just to kind of pivot a little bit and open up the idea for the importance of art and expression, or working out, and how all of those different modalities are a really great complement for trauma processing.
Yeah, 100%. And people think, well, I can't be creative because I'm not an artist. I'm not a painter or a singer or whatever. Being creative, here's the thing, creativity is applies to every dimension of your life. Okay. You can wash the dishes and make it a dance. Okay.
Yes.
That's being creative. You can, like, give your imagination that childlike sense of wonder when you look around at the world, whether it's like if you're gardening and you have a conversation with your plants or whatever, and you're like connecting on an intuitive level to the energy of it. Even lifting weights, it can be very cathartic and playful, and the creation of your body over time, that is a very beautiful artistic expression as well. So everyone can find creativity and fun and playfulness in their lives, no matter what they're experiencing.
Oh, I love that. That's such a great reminder. Absolutely. And then it really brings us back into the moment to moment meditation of things and the dream of things. And again, for me, really brings us to the moment of remembering our power to choose in every moment, right? Of how do we have the most fun with the challenges that we, set forth for the lesson. How can we go through this hero's journey in the
100%.
most fun way possible?
Yeah, because if it's not fun, you're not going to stick with it.
Right. Yeah. So powerful. And for you in particular, I'm just curious. Yeah, this is where I want to go with this. So again, for you, you have this, again, this kind of like rebel nature that's very integrated, and this level, again, kind of like that punk rock energy that I really resonate with. Yeah, man. Yeah, that's coming through like in a new way. And I feel that there's quite a few people listening that resonate kind of at that same archetype. I've taken note throughout, like, being reconnected with people that really feel as my family, that have that level of energy connected to bringing this new transformation of darkness integrated, or darkness being in the light. And I know for myself, sometimes even when you're in those moments of having fun and expressing yourself, there, for me, sometimes there seems to be still kind of like the fear of our own power, or like a resistance to how transformational it is. And like being able to like viscerally feel it. And sometimes as we get closer to the nugget, right? closer to our true selves, as we're playing more, as we're investigating, I know for me personally, then there becomes this like almost like retraction space away from it, because you're like, whoa, I am so powerful. I'm not just here for change, I am change itself.
Mhm.
And wielding that level of darkness in really integrative ways. So just kind of taking it a little bit deeper, and offering that as a theme for you to riff on, and just to see how you resonate with that.
You're right. There is a lot of intensity that comes with approaching the core power of who you are,
Mm,
whether it be the intensity of love and
mm,
like overwhelming love for humanity,
mm,
and like crying at just the suffering of the world and how much you want to help it. There can be intensity with rage, that righteous anger of, protection and defending. There's a lot of ways that this can come through, that intensity. And that's the importance of, again, got to go back to trauma. Like
mm,
the more that you reparent yourself, the more you're used to being with the emotions that come up and
mm,
transmuting them in positive ways, not just listening to your body, but taking action and saying, okay, I hear you, I love you. It's like your inner child. And this is what we're going to do to
mm,
help you meet those needs. Okay.
mm,
And so it's about taking that intensity of emotion and transmuting it in positive, creative, helpful, healing ways.
mhm,
So that's really, it's a step-by-step process. And you know what's interesting is that the fear is usually so big that it's not even real. Like when you
mm,
get to it, it's not even, you realize like, why?
mm,
Why was I afraid of that? That's not
mm,
even a big deal, you know?
mm,
It's like when you're, I don't like, again, going back to theater, like you're really nervous before you're on stage and like, oh, what about this and what about that? But then you get on stage and like you're a minute into it and you just, boom, it just snaps. And you're like, oh, as long as I am in this and I'm using that feeling in what I'm doing, then my doing comes from a place of being.
yeah.
When your doing comes from a place of being, then
Mm,
effort becomes effortless.
mhm.
It's no longer overwhelming.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Yeah. And I know that we know this, and those of us listening, we know this, and I know this, and I know you know this, but I just sometimes I kind of like lead people in certain ways, because I just want to hear the translation of what's going to come out of an individual. So thank you so much for that. And again, there's like this, just this reminding of that language is so interesting, right? Like we can really like pontificate about all these different ideas, we can talk about it all, but really what I believe what happens is, yes, even when we're being analytical and logical and listening and taking things in, we may get like an actual concept, right, that we've never really heard of in that way. But I think what begins to really happen too, especially for those of us that have maybe been on this path for a while, there more so is like a frequency that we can rest in, that there's something within the cells that gets activated, that's just like, oh, okay, yes, like a little reminder or a little push or a little hug. And I think for those of us that perhaps really resonate with this agent of transformation, this kind of new energy of a punk rock nature, or being like, angels of death, or transformation itself, change itself. I think for those of us that perhaps sometimes forget that it's not a very real fear. I think a lot of people, because I totally agree with what you're saying, that really at the end of the day, it isn't real. But for certain people, that level of the experience of it is super, super real. Um, and just feeling into it now, I feel like there is that space of our soul family or our collective, right? That just the remembering of the community in that way, of these other agents of transformation, can really serve as a net, as a guide, as the stage itself, right, to stand on, to be able to go like, oh, I know that I'm safe enough to express. So there's also something that's so beautiful about um, being the visceral reminder of the connection of community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to dovetail off that,
Yeah.
a lot of people who are in our position often feel like they don't have community and they don't
Hmm.
have the connection. And that's been me before. And for those people, here's what helped me. And this is going to sound dark too, but
bring it.
Here's the fact. One day you are going to die. When you die, you're going to look back at your life and you're going to think to yourself, did I do what matters most? Did I give as much as I could? Was I able to love myself as much as I could? You know, when you die, like, ultimately all your intellectual blah 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 goes away, like all the the trivial facts. What really matters is the constitution of your soul, right? Were you able to really use life as a crucible for transformation? Were you able to really put yourself out there and conquer your fear? Because at the end of the day, like, we all have some capacity, some ability to give to the world in a very unique way. And if we don't utilize our gifts, then we are squandering the gifts that were given to us from the divine. And that is a huge betrayal, because our lives are completely dependent on the exploitation of other countries in the physical realm, right? And we have a responsibility to utilize that energy and make the world a better place so it doesn't have to keep doing that. Okay? And so when I keep that in mind, in times when I've been lonely and there's no one else I can connect to, which was fairly often, like, there's not many people can relate to that kind of journey that we're on. And when I remember that, like, okay, this is like Bill Hicks said, like, it's just a ride, and ultimately at the end of the ride, you're going to look back and, like, how did I experience this? How did I play it out? What did I do? And was I able to really be the best that I can be? And if I were to die without doing that, I would feel so bad. I don't want that. Like, and I remember that every day. And it might sound morbid, like, hey, one day I'm going to die. But that actually puts everything into perspective, and it fills me up with so much gratitude and excitement.
Yes. Oh, I love it so much. Thank you for that. It's so motivational and inspiring. And again, like, just rings that bell of truth. And I think it's actually completely positive. I think I was like, yes, go into the darkness so far that it's just positivity. Like, super love and light. You're going to die. Love and light, kids. You're going to die.
Exactly.
But really, there's such a level of profound truth to that. And it's almost kind of like a stereotypical phrase, right? Like, live as if you're going to die tomorrow. And I think in ways it's become kind of like almost lost its meaning in ways sometimes. But I think, again, if we're brave enough to really look at the grand perspective of things and really take into the level of the hero's journey, exactly what you're saying, taking a deep levelship of the ownership of our responsibility and all of the ways that we can define what responsibility is, responding to our power, to our passions, to our desires, and taking action. And having no regrets, having no, just pushing through that fear and just fully embracing the ride. And I do think that it's a paradoxical level of brilliance that we can get to when we really, really take ownership of the life and the death of the bright, amazing beings that we are incarnated in this very dark and dense experience. And it's like we were talking about a bit earlier, it is through that complete ownership of it that allows us to find the power in the center and just keep going through. And I know for myself, what really helps is I ask my higher self, or I ask God, whatever, however more and more, I am really kind of like playing with the idea of Jesus and Yeshua and like God and a grace that's like outside of us. It's kind of been a really interesting new addition to this experience. And I'm like, oh, okay. Give it to Jesus. Just ask Jesus. Jesus is going to be like, okay, interesting. That's a different topic of conversation. But what I'm getting to is asking my higher self, asking source, give me ideas. What should I do? What can I do today? Give me some ideas. And you make a list and you just do everything that you can think of. So I know that you get very inspired and you get very much in a flow of your momentum of like progress. So in your experience, how do you kind of take these concepts into the day-to-day moment? Do you play with ideas like that, where like just do everything that you can think of in one day, because you might die tomorrow? So just kind of riffing on those concepts.
Yeah, I actually have lists.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm constantly like I've always had a sketchbook with me as long as I can remember, and it's been like my security blanket in a lot of ways because it's a way that I can disassociate from the world. But it's also taught me the value of writing things down, whether it be on paper, whether it be on your phone, and just making a list. And this is actually one of the exercises I give to people when it comes to healing from trauma. This is part of reparenting yourself. Write down what it is that you want to have for your life. Like, what is it that is most important to you? Reorient your priorities, reorient your perspective, not on what's wrong and, focusing on the external world that you have no control over. It doesn't matter. Don't get distracted. But what matters most? Prioritize that list, and then write down ways in your life that you can support yourself to achieving those goals. And as basic as that might sound, virtually nobody does it. Okay. Yeah. Most of us just wake up and we bounce around like a ping pong ball, or just like, you don't go anywhere. You just wind up wasting so much time and you don't prioritize what's important. And it takes a little bit of discipline, but you get so much more done. You feel so much better about yourself. And ultimately, like that's how it happens. And things are subject to change. There are times where I push myself too hard and I'm like, okay, I need to take a weekend to myself just to like take things easy and just self-care, because I've been pushing myself really hard for 2 weeks straight. So it's not about sticking like slavishly to a schedule and to this list that I must do, but it's just a good reminder, like a parent, like, hey, sweetie, this is what needs to happen. So let's do that to the best of your ability. If you need to take a step away, that's okay. I understand. I love you. Take care of yourself. But when you're ready, boom, let's come back home. Okay, this is what matters most.
Oh, I love it. It's so great. And when we're doing that exactly the way that you're sharing, we're doing so many different things for ourselves simultaneously. Like I've got people vacuuming over my head right now, and my neighbors are vacuuming. So if it picks up on the sound, but it'll probably pick up on okay, you don't hear it, so we'll see. There's so many things that we're doing simultaneously, right? We're unconditionally loving ourselves, reparenting ourselves. Exactly how you phrased it is just so beautiful, with all of the different nuances that can come with those ideas. And I'm a big proponent of writing lists and having a bit of structure. I think it's become almost too far the other way sometimes, where it's like, oh, well, we'll see what's in the flow. And, then like you said, you're a ping pong ball, or you're literally like a leaf blowing in the wind. And again, I always love find paradoxes and everything. It's like what I search for, that I think giving ourselves that type of structure actually opens up for the true amount of freedom that we're really capable of. And we're being really clear with our desires and what we want. And exactly, if it doesn't get done in the day, it's because it doesn't need to get done, or we, in ways, almost use the list and sticking to it as a permission slip or a tool to further learn how to parent ourselves. Like, it gives us a focus to be able to have that conversation with ourselves, because if we're just kind of floating around, it doesn't give us an anchor to continue that conversation of really showing up for ourselves and parenting ourselves. So I love that.
And when we don't show up for ourselves, it gives us you see your list, like, oh crap, I didn't do that today. Why didn't I do that? Okay, what are my reasons? Oh, are those excuses? Are they legitimate? If they're excuses, let's get to the bottom of it and see what needs we were trying to meet in the intermediary time that we didn't get to that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. It's so powerful and so important, and it's so needed for us as physical beings to take physical action, especially around sometimes perhaps these more subtle aspects of our being. And whether it's journaling or I really like writing. I've always been a writer, that you have as well. But some people they don't like writing. So I often talk about talking out loud to yourself, recording yourself is another good way to do it. But honestly,
you can talk into this phone and it'll write
yeah.
what you say. Like, you don't
Yeah.
have to write it.
Yeah, totally. Like, we're really good at making up excuses too, to be like, oh, I don't like to know. It's like, you're gonna die tomorrow potentially. So what are you gonna do today?
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm curious too, let's actually go back with them. This will kind of maybe expand and just bring some grace and divinity and kind of hold love and light into the depths of the polarity that we've been going on. Because now I am just kind of curious, because I might start talking about this more, but I saw you kind of giggle and kind of laugh when I was talking about Jesus and God and those kind of different perspectives of that true grace, that true divinity. So in your translation, it is a Sunday. So in your translation, what is that God, or what is that essence to you?
Putting it into words it can't be done, right? How can you encapsulate the totality of objective reality into a tiny little phrase, an acoustic translation between people? Like, you can't do that. But if we're going to try, for the sake of this podcast, it would
you don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah. God is the underlying force that unifies everything. And some people understand it as God, as Jesus, as Buddha, as, Yahweh, or Krishna, or quantum physics, or whatever the case may be. Like, many names, many faces, but it's the same thing. Okay. So that's how I understand it. I have come to that conclusion through a lot of research, through my own personal experience. And I think it's just one of the most, it's not like a middle ground thing. It's just seeing the commonalities and tying it all together. Like, okay, all these stories they're like fingers pointing at the same star, and you just look at where they're pointing and you can see that point, like, oh, that's what it is. And you scrape away all the dogma, the ideology, the cultural bias, the sexist biases, the blah, 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 blah. And then you get down to the core of what it is. And God can't be known, but it can be felt. And there's a deeper knowing through your body that's called gnosis. And this is talked about deeper in esoteric literature, where there's different levels of knowledge, different levels of feeling, different levels of physicality. And one of the highest is gnosis, which is the connection between the self and God, and this inner knowing, which is more than intuition. It's more than that. It's deeper than that. And it can only be attained through a certain level of self-work to purify yourself as a vessel to receive that knowledge and wisdom. Without that. So in short, that to me is what God is. I totally respect when people are like, I pray to Jesus, I pray to whatever. The one thing, as always, there is one condition, which is be careful of who you invite into your space. I know a lot of people. I worked in a spiritual bookstore, Mystic Journey bookstore in LA, and there's a lot of New Age people there. I worked there during 2012 and afterwards. And a lot of people would say, like, I'm calling in my angels, I'm calling in the ascended masters and that sort of thing. Here's the thing. Discarnate spirits, they can think of themselves as angels. So therefore, you've just invited a whole bunch of walking around dead dudes to come into your space and mess with you. Like, be careful about that, okay? If you want to communicate to the divine source of all creation, that's beautiful. Go for it. If you want to speak specifically to your ancestors in this lineage, in your incarnation, go for it. But be careful about just inviting anything into your field and just being very loosey-goosey with your intentions, because that can be a recipe for inviting danger.
Danger and if we really wanted to look at it in kind of that huge bird's eye view perspective, an opportunity for more lessons and change and all that kind of stuff. But there's going to be easier ways to do that potentially. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about heal your trauma, look at yourself, and it's that cyclical process of it all. And yeah, just stating that as a bookend for that. And then looping back around just to the idea of the knowingness of God, the state of God, the gnosis of God is, you gave a beautiful translation and put words to what it is for you. And it is that level of, however we wish to translate it, to define it, that all-encompassing unconditional love for all aspects of the all that is and all polarity, and that each and every one of us has our own translation of what it feels like, of what the state of gnosis is. And I think that's palpable for people. And the more that we know ourselves and heal our trauma, the more that we find that space for ourselves. And going back to what it is that you were saying earlier, is what allows you to be able to push through the fear, or to create, or to take ownership of the polarity and the responsibility that we have. There's that level of knowingness first. And a lot of people that I've been chatting with, that is a lot of the times their translation for how do you do what you're doing? How are you pushing through during this time, is finding that level of knowing. And then equating that sensation also to however we translate divinity or God or source or love or consciousness, however, whatever words, but being able to feel that place and knowing that there's even a word for it. The gnosis of being able to feel that, again, kind of as like a visceral sensory implant, if we will, in our cells, is really beautiful. So yeah, thank you for that divine translation of the gnosis.
Do the best we can.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So where can people find you to be able to further connect with you, learn from you, receive your services? Where can we find you?
You can find me on GuideTrue.com. You'll see a lot of my articles on there, some videos as well. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. And yeah, so feel free to connect with me anywhere. And hopefully you put links down below this video as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Feel free to reach out, talk to me, let me know if you need anything, or if I can just point you in the right direction. I'd be happy to help.
Oh, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing and connecting and joining me today. It's been really, really fun having this conversation with you. And I am so sincerely appreciative of who you are, and the precise flavor that you're bringing at this time is just so needed. So punk rock and super divine. And I'm just so thankful for you being you, Humberto.
I appreciate that. I'm really glad to have you have had me on this show too, because this has been long overdue and people need to have these conversations too. So the fact that you're even doing this, like, hats off to you. Like, people need to, instead of consuming culture, they need to create culture. They need to step out and really put themselves out there to offer people not just a platform to listen to, but really a permission slip to express themselves authentically and know that it's okay to talk about these things. So I really appreciate what you're doing. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much. It is my absolute pleasure. And thank you to those of you watching and listening and being a part of this community. And let's all take a nice deep inhale and exhale. Though our minds may be different, though our bodies may be different, it is through our hearts that we know our spirits are one. This has been Gabbing with Gita. Thank you very much, Humberto Braga, for joining me today. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next time. Say goodbye, Humberto.
Peace out, everyone.
Aloha.